All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is Peter Schrappen, your co-host in the helm. Here with Mark Manziel. We're sharing a love seat. Mark in the helm. How you doing? Hi, Landons. How's it going?
Seat.
I don't know.
Are we gonna do like the Golden Globes that I'll reach across the screen?
Yeah, I wasn't impressed with what I saw from that, so I'd be fine just avoiding the Golden Globe. I think we can do better than the Golden Globes.
I think we can too.
It's great
Hello,
to see you.
Leonard and Lorena.
Hey.
Hi there.
How's it going?
And I just want to call it out that Leonard was involved with boating today and yesterday, and actually pretty much for the last week.
Exactly.
Project.
It was close to cruising, but it wasn't true to the full definition of cruising, which in my vocabulary is working on your boat in remote locations. And so we're in home port. So I guess the true definition of cruising is working on your boat in exotic locations. So, but not exotic. So regular old stuff, just trying to get the thing ready for the season.
Leonard was down in the engine room all day. So I imagine there were a few choice words that we could not share on the show.
Yeah, I'm picturing the Christmas Story scene where the dad's down working on the furnace and just spewing out expletives and comes out all dirty. And yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah.
So
good.
Cooling systems were the theme of the day.
Exactly.
But he's getting ready, and he's Leonard and Lorena are getting ready to head north to Alaska. They're going to make it happen.
Exactly.
Now, seeing I opened up that box, I should, in our announcements, say we heard nothing new regarding the border and any border opening. Things are still the same. It is an active point of discussion. There are tourism groups talking to in Canada, talking and pushing to have the border open because it's really important to their business. So we'll see. I worry that the Canadians don't have access to the vaccines yet. They're getting theirs from Europe, and so their numbers are not going down yet like we're seeing in the US.
Well, good. Yeah. And I was going to just briefly mention, Mark, that we're in day 53 of the legislative session, what's called Hump Day. It's a 105-day session. So we're just about over the hump, and there's been some fun activities around House Bill 1107, which is that charter skipper issue that I've been working on. It passed the House 97-0. So now it's going to go through the Senate and hopefully have the same sort of, I don't know. Am I jinxing things talking about how successful?
No, Peter,
no, it
that's
feels good. Of
excellent.
confidence. So yeah, it'll feel good there.
That's great. It's 97-0 sets it up well for the Senate.
Yeah, like I say, I was working the phones all weekend to get us to a consensus there, but that wouldn't be a lie. And so that, yeah, but it's a great bill, and looking forward to having the support in the Senate moving forward. Now allow permits to be sold to out-of-state boats with the skippers provided. So yeah, that's good. I just wrapped up an etiquette class, Mark. My business etiquette class came to a close.
Really? How many days was that?
That was 37 days, Mark. No, I'm just kidding. It was 4 days. The teacher was Arden Kleiss, rhymes with nice. Spinach in Your Boss's Teeth is the name of the book. Essential Etiquette for Professional Success. And it ended with a quiz, Mark. And I got, guess what place I came in, Mark?
I'll say second or third place.
Second place. That's right. Thank you.
Very good.
I got 9 out of 10.
Wow, look
first.
at that.
Yeah, ladies first, Mark. I could have won if I wanted, but I was like, ladies first. I'm a chivalrous individual here. No, it was a great class. Learned about eating the proper way. We did dinner etiquette this evening, and I brought all my silverware to practice setting the table and the proper way to eat a dinner roll. I've been eating dinner rolls as my mom is watching this right now. not eating dinner rolls correctly. I've been eating them like apples, Mark, and that's you're supposed to just butter and tear and eat and butter and tear and eat. And I've been just kind of for the last 44 beautiful years just been munching those things like
biting the end of
oh,
the roll off.
keep them coming. Yeah, yelling across the room for more rolls. So the
Yeah.
times are changing, Lorena.
Yeah.
No, it was a good course. So yeah, then
Sounds
a
like
couple.
a good investment for the NMTA.
Well, that's who do you think paid for that, Mark?
Yeah.
I got out the company card on that one. No, but she was a great teacher. I'm actually gonna have my son take the class for kids, so maybe I can kind of eavesdrop on what he's learning as well and pick up a few tips and tricks. But that was fun. And then a couple other pieces coming out this week. The Magnolia Bridge on the cut is going to be repaired, and they were going to close it for 27 days in a row. And guess which month that was going to be, Mark?
June,
August.
probably.
August, even worse. So
Even worse.
thankfully, the bridge administrator from the Coast Guard said, time out. We got 0 comments on this from boaters. This doesn't seem right. So the bridge administrator reached out to Arbaugh and NMTA and said, hey, do you guys care about this? And so we most certainly do care about it. And also I realize I now need to read the notice to mariners, which is a new piece of reading for me, which I'll be
Yes.
perusing more than I have been, which is not saying much. So yeah, so we're definitely involved in that and trying to find something that works for the community, but also works for boaters. And I'm gonna go on a limb and say, how about we pick the month that is least trafficked by boats, since the project is not water dependent. So that's
Yeah.
we're not excited about the project at all, because anytime you mess with the drawbridges, it raises our blood pressure as a group that cares about growing boating and increasing the fund. So stay tuned on that. And then I would end on a downer here. The boatyard permit, which is what the 49 boatyards in our state rely on to make sure that they are testing their copper effectively, came out this week. It's a draft permit, and it's the toughest boatyard permit in the country. It's usually
Wow.
put out by the EPA, and in our state, it's the Department of Ecology. And not to bury the lead here, but it's going to move copper from 147 parts per billion in their sample. Think about it as a drug test. So if they get more than 147 parts per billion with a B of copper, they raise a red flag. And you raise 6 red flags in the course of 5 years, you're in timeout. So now they're going to move 147 down to 15 parts per billion of copper with the first iteration of this draft permit. So we will be actively engaged on that front and making sure that ecology knows that that is crazy talk and is not in line with reality and attainable, workable, supported by any sort of technology. So
Well, and my question is always, how does that compare to the runoff from asbestos breaks from the highways?
yeah, there's a Puget. I'll put that in the chat. This recent article in the Puget Sound Institute out of the University of Washington did that whole expose on tires and baby salmon and how those two don't mix. So
Yes.
interestingly about this copper, boatyards are not responsible only for the stormwater that comes off of their property, but they're responsible for every Tom, Dick, and Harry's copper that comes down the hill from their neighbors as well. They've got to clean that up as well. So anything that comes off of their roof, the chain link fence, neighbors, and it comes onto a boatyard, the boatyards are then responsible for that water as it enters into Puget Sound. So it is a very tough proposition, and stay tuned.
Well, and the impact of this, unfortunately, is raises the cost of the boatyard, which gets passed on to us boaters in terms of the cost for us for repairs and so forth. It's a major issue.
That's if they stay in business. We've lost about 50% of the boatyards in the last 10. I can put that number in the chat, but it's a precipitous decline in the number of boatyards. And when there aren't boatyards, people are working on boats in their backyards, which then turn into a non-point source effluent, which is not counted. So we really like boatyards for a whole host of reasons. So to see this change has been, it's a problem. So we will be engaged on that. So stay tuned. It's out for public comment right now. That ends on April 15th, and the new permit takes effect July 1st. So that is my update. Yeah. And I would one more little piece for you, Mark. I attended the NMMA State of the Industry briefing this morning, and I've got a few numbers. 200,000 boats were built in 2020. I've got my little notes here. 100,000 of those of our new boaters, not what 200,000 of the 100,000 new boaters are on the market. 30% of all new boat buyers in 2020 were first-time buyers. So we're seeing an influx of new boaters during COVID-19 times. So, yep.
Well, we've heard that, and we've seen that, and I don't know if it's why our boat show university that was very well attended, which it was, but luckily a lot of these new boaters are taking classes, and they realize, and that's terrific, because it can be really scary out there on the water when you don't know and don't understand. And we'll see how that goes.
I learned in my etiquette class that I need to refrain from so much head bobbing, but yes, Mark, I will head bob there. I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's going on with the land-ins?
Well, we got, I was just gonna, my head bobbing, the echoing the new boaters out there. We're seeing it also with a lot of questions that we get from emails from readers out there, and they're declaring themselves as new boaters. And to their credit, they're asking here at Wagoner Guide. You know, also follow some of the forums that are out there, boater forums, and there are a lot of questions out there and a lot of people declaring themselves as new boaters. And the boater group, is very good in in putting advice out there and helping new boaters. So it's good to see that, and it's good to see all the new boaters out there. Welcome to the group. But we do have some updates if you're ready for the news of the day.
Bring it
Yes.
on. Yeah, we need like an
Yes.
intro. Yeah.
So we have, I seem to get attracted to this, but the military operations, the Navy is going to be conducting some exercises on March 9th, next week. And that's up in the Port Townsend area. So that's the Indian Island, the munitions depot out there. And they're going to be doing some exercises from 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. And they want you 1,000 yards away from boats. They're going to be around the wharf area. There was one here that said that here it is, blue police boats with gray and blue lights flashing, and there's going to be something blue floating in the water. I still haven't quite figured out what that means yet, but stay away from the area, basically. Port Townsend area, Indian Island next week on the 9th, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then the one that I still want to see sometime, this is down on the Great Bend on Hood Canal, and on March 9th and March 10th next week, they're going to be doing the Air Force is going to be doing some water drops. And one of them, so the first one on the 9th is going to be from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then the one on the 10th is going to be from 5 p.m. until 9 p.m. So at night they're out there. That ought to be really exciting to watch. But anyway, stay out of the area. The Great Bend next week, 9th and 10th. And then the good news on some openings, some things. Foss Seaport on the Foss Waterway. And that's an education, a maritime education and museum and an event center down there. And that, of course, has been closed for COVID-19. And they've announced that they will start phased opening of that museum and that attraction down on Foss Waterway. Hopefully, we'll see some more of the museums down in that area opening up fairly soon. Some good signs out here that things are opening up a little bit. And then one other past news here, which goes back to our snowstorm here. And it turns out that Jensen's Marina, which is on San Juan Island, Friday Harbor area, and they had a roof collapse in there on the snow. So they trapped a number of boats. Forgotten how many here you had? Eight boats were trapped underneath those sheds that collapsed. They have since then been extricating the boats and removing the debris, and they're going to rebuild the marina or rebuild part of it. I guess it's still undetermined as to whether they're going to put the covers over it or not, and that's the happenings. And then to transition over to Lorena on this one, just wanted to introduce that in 2019 Congress established a heritage area in all of our waters here in the Puget Sound area. The marine waters were established as a marine national heritage area. It's the first and only national heritage area that's focused on marine area. And there's a lot of activities going on coming up here.
So yes, this is exciting for Washington State. It's the first, only, and to date of a maritime heritage. They call it NHA, National Heritage Area. And for Washington State, that encompasses 3,000 miles of saltwater coastline and includes 18 tribes, 13 counties, 32 cities, 30 port districts, and of course, many harbors, inlets, peninsulas, island coasts, and parks. And while this is supported by the National Park Service, the National Heritage Areas are locally run. So in our case, it's the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation that will be running this, celebrating our designation as a maritime heritage area. And the steering committee will be reaching out to communities, counties, cities, ports, maritime trades, parks, chamber of commerce, boating organizations, anyone who wants to get involved. They want your ideas of things that we might do as a state to celebrate this: conferences, workshops, maritime projects, talks, etc. And so there's a survey you can fill out and express your ideas or your interest in getting involved. And Leonard's going to be putting that on the chat line. So the website will be there for you to participate in the survey. And there's another website to find out more about these coming events. So check that out.
They were the guest of my meeting today for the Government Affairs Committee, Lorena. They presented, and it sounds like an apple pie and mom kind of, hi mom, sounds like a mom and apple pie kind of story. It's kind of like a national park, but for our marine areas. There are 55 in the country. Most are on the East Coast and in the Midwest, and this is the first one in our area. It took 10 years for Congress to get this approved, so we're really grateful to our bipartisan delegation to make it happen. So yeah, good stuff, Lorena. Nice job.
We had a question come in on the chat line about when are the people who signed up for the Admiral's level of the Seattle Boat Show going to be getting their extras. And I can tell you, I was in the office today and we started shipping the first batch of 1,000 Wagner guides going out. And we're checking on the other items that are part of your package. But it appears they're all going out over the next 2 weeks. So have a little patience with that, and you're going to be getting Wagner guides and your membership with Boat US, and there were quite a few other things in that package. So thank you for asking.
What's on tap for the rest of the show tonight, Mark?
Peter, I thought you were taking care of it.
Mark, that joke never gets old. Never gets old. Always appropriate.
All right.
Nicely done.
Well, we do have a great presentation for you tonight. I'm going to let Lorena introduce our speaker, but we have a new Sea Life Rescue Center that's just opening up. They just put the finishing touches on the building, I think today or this week. And we have their executive director. Lorena, why don't you tell a little bit about Casey?
We're so pleased to have Casey Mclean with us tonight. She is the executive director and she is a veterinary nurse at SR3. And of course, SR3 stands for Response, Rehab, and Research. She's going to be telling us about how they care for marine animals that have been injured or whales that have been entangled, how they are protecting the southern resident whales, and of course, so exciting, our first marine animal hospital here in the Pacific Northwest. So,
and they even have an ambulance. Maybe she'll show pictures. There she is.
Yeah.
Casey, you do have an ambulance, don't you?
I do have an ambulance.
And she's gonna get Mark a ride in it. Oh well, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Behave yourself, Mark. I am not allowed to run the lights and sirens. Everyone always asks us about that, and wish
even
I
on my birthday.
Even on your birthday, maybe just down the side streets or something. But
okay.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for having me.
This is exciting, and apparently this week is the perfect week to have you on because you just finished the building.
We did just wrap up construction, so I'm going to tell you guys all about that. So I think I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen, if that's all right.
Sure.
If we can get this going here. All right. You guys see that okay?
It looks great. Yeah.
Looks great.
I'm frozen. There we go. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks again, everybody. I really appreciate you having me here to talk about this. And as mentioned, my name is Casey Mclean, and I'm the executive director and a veterinary nurse, which means that I actually do work directly with the animals and our veterinary staff. And this is Sea Life Response, Rehab, and Research. That's what SR3 stands for. a long name, so if you just remember SR3, you're doing good. But I moved to the Pacific Northwest in 2010, and I grew up on the East Coast, did all of my work in college on the East Coast, and so I was really surprised at the extreme lack of resources that we had in our region when these animals needed help. There's lots of people that respond to them on the beach to check and see if they're okay, but if it's determined they needed help, the vast majority of animals had nowhere to go. And so that's really what SR3 was born out of, was knowing that what the resources were in the other parts of the country and wanting to see a better option for them here. So again, that's kind of where this passion came from and where this was developed from. I am one of the founders of the organization as well. And so we just started off on a mission, and we've just kept going, and it's been growing over the past, we started in 2011, so it's been growing for a while. And our mission is to promote the health and welfare of marine wildlife in the Pacific Northwest. And what that really boils down to is rescuing and protecting all the different variety of marine mammals and sea turtles. Did any of you guys know we have sea turtles here in Washington?
No, I didn't know that.
I always love that. That's always one of my favorite facts to share with people. They're like, wait, what, turtles? You would expect turtles in kind of like, a tropical area where I am, but in Washington, it's not what we expect, but we do get sea turtles up here as well. And so our hospital will be able to help them too. And the way that we protect these animals is through our 3 programs, which is our 3 R's, and that's response, rehabilitation, and research. So I'm kind of going to step us through those different programs and what each of those do to help the animals. And we do this because marine animals are sentinels of ocean health. That means basically that their health is telling us how healthy our oceans are. And of course, ocean health is directly linked to human health as well. So it's important that that's protected for all of us. I do want to introduce you to our small team, just give you a better idea of who SR3 is. So starting in this top left corner, this is Doug Sandilands, who is our whale entanglement specialist. We're going to be talking a little bit about whale entanglement here in a few more slides. Below him is Dr. Holly Fernbach, who focuses on our whale and dolphin health research, including southern residents. Over next to her, this is Rachel Bishop, our development and communications officer. So Rachel basically ensures that we all still have jobs while we're doing all of this. And then to her right is Dr. Greg Frankfurter. He is our veterinarian, so takes care of all the animals that might come into the hospital, but also does field research as well. I'm at the top here, just right above him. Again, I mentioned I'm a veterinary nurse, so I do work directly with the animals. And then this picture off to the right are just a small sampling of our incredible volunteers. This organization is truly largely volunteer run. They are the lifeblood of the organization. We depend on them for everything from education and outreach to daily animal care help, responding to animals in the field. So that's one of the things that's really exciting about having a hospital is it's a place for the community to come and get directly involved in ocean conservation. So we're excited about that. We don't do this on our own. There are some incredible organizations doing wonderful work throughout the entire Pacific Northwest. Many of them you might know. These are just a few that we've partnered with along the West Coast in general. But I'm sure plenty of you know other organizations that are doing fabulous work. So we are big on collaborating because we know that we can't, nor do we want to do this on our own. It's going to take all of us really working hard to protect our Salish Sea. And I think all of us do this because we are hearing the warning signs that the ocean is basically shouting at us, from everything from sea star wasting disease to continued declines in southern residents. We're seeing an increase in sea turtle strandings. We're seeing increases in humpback whale strandings. Sea otters are showing up with some unusual diseases we haven't seen before. And of course, there's always these huge threats of things like warm water blobs and ocean acidification. So all of these groups really are hearing what's going on out there and working towards making this all better in our own separate ways, but we do collaborate on different projects. And these threats are changing rapidly, so rapidly that it's really hard for scientists to even keep up with what's the newest threat this year, or what has changed. Maybe that thing we thought was such a big deal 2 years ago, well, now it's not even around. Perhaps we missed our window to really address it. So it's really difficult to keep up with all of that. The three big threats that we typically see with wildlife that comes into the hospital or, health issues are emaciation, disease, and human interaction. And those are broad, they can encompass a lot, but this is the top three we most often see. And so one of the ways that SR3 is addressing that is by building the hospital that we talked about. So this is a picture of our outdoor enclosures that you're seeing. Hopefully, can you guys see my mouse?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is our outdoor enclosure. This is where animals would spend their time recovering before they go back out to the ocean, getting strong, getting fat, so they're nice and healthy before they go back out. This is that ambulance that Mark mentioned at the beginning here. And we have used this actually to take animals all the way down to California before. So we'll respond to animals in the field with the ambulance, just like an ambulance would respond to an accident or something like that. We can transport them in the back of it. There's nothing super special about it that we've had to change necessarily for the animals. It is a human ambulance that we basically just kind of put our own wrap and design on and use it as is. So it's kind of what you would expect.
It's a
The
great
animals don't.
design. It looks cool.
Thanks. It is kind of fun to drive it around. The animals don't have to travel in water. A lot of people ask us that. They can travel in dog kennels, or they might just be on a foam pad, but they don't need to be in water all the time.
Casey, where's the hospital located? We got that in the chat.
Yeah, this is in Des Moines Marina, so just south of Seattle, hopefully close to a lot of you. A lot of people also ask us if we're going to be open to the public, and we're not. It's not like an aquarium is, but we will have community days where people can come and visit. We also can do behind the scenes tours as appropriate. So, but it's not open where you can buy tickets or anything like that, because these animals do have to return to the wild. So we want to make sure they stay as wild as possible. And they tend to kind of get used to people a little too quickly. So we do have to kind of keep them protected from the general public. So before this hospital, a lot of animals may have been left on the beach suffering, or even have to be humanely euthanized because there just weren't resources to help them. So we're really excited about that. One of the cases is that we recently treated just a few months ago. This is Jameis. He's a little fur seal, and he was found here he was actually found in Oregon off the coast. He was brought to our facility for some very short-term care so we could get him stabilized. And then we took him in the ambulance down to Sausalito, California. It was about a 15-hour drive. And that's pretty stressful on an animal that's already in compromised condition. But Jameis did great, and he was released actually just a couple weeks ago back to the ocean. And so he's just one of the great success cases, but also just proves the need in the region that it would be better for him to be able to be rehabilitated here and released versus that long drive. These are all the different types of patients that we expect to be able to help at the hospital. I mentioned fur seals, that's these guys in the corner. So basically the hospital is built to help anything from a small harbor seal pup all the way up to a large sea lion, and even something like a small dolphin or a porpoise. Whales and things like that, of course, we're not bringing into a hospital. We can either help them in the field as possible, but we're not removing any of the larger whales from the water or anything like that. And there's those turtles again that I mentioned.
Casey, can I ask you a few questions in the chat?
Of course.
Yeah, we have a question from Denny. Can you reach animals stranded on islands where cars can reach and only be reached by boats?
We can. So we do have boats, and we're able to, depending on the size of the animal, of course, transport them by boat if we need to. We can also bring the ambulance over on a ferry if they're talking about like the San Juan Islands or something like that. So yeah, we have a lot of different options. We have a lot of folks who help us with that, just depending, the Coast Guard's helped us at times. WDFW does things. So yes, we will always trying to find a way to help.
Great. Another question, this question's from Thatcher. Can you tell us how the dwindling kelp affects the animals?
I'm sorry, how the dwindling what?
Kelp affects the animals.
So obviously, so one of the ways that's a big issue is for forage fish populations. So a lot of them spend their nursery year time growing up in the kelp so that they're protected. Well, if they don't have that kelp as a place to actually become a bigger fish, those populations can go down rather quickly. And forage fish are the base of the food chain, and they feed all of these animals. So, people tend to forget about how important herring and sardines and anchovies and things like that are. Obviously, when the kelp beds are really important for sea otters too. So off the coast of Washington, that's an area that they really depend on for, they'll put their young in there. They help keep the sea urchins down. So it's a really important area for those guys too.
Okay, and then a longtime fan of the show, Diane Lander, we all know, she's got a question for you, Casey. Why
Sure.
are those California sea lions hanging around in Ballard lately? They were here for 3 weeks, but they left today. One smaller one stayed behind on the dock. It doesn't look healthy, and I was wondering if we should call you. What is your phone number? No, I'm just kidding about the phone number part, but we'll see it if it's still there. We'll see if it's still there in the morning. So what's your advice?
Yeah, it's funny. I just did an interview with My Ballard on this, and I know they've caused quite the ruckus. A lot of people have been very interested in what's going on. And sea lions are highly mobile, and there's so many factors that could have affected why they came into that nice little quiet cove area. It could have been anything from, we had some pretty rough storms there for a little while, so they may have just been looking for a sheltered area to relax. The transient killer whales have been in the sound, which eat sea lions, so possibly could have driven them into that area trying to avoid those killer whales. Last year we had record numbers of herring spawning, so were they coming back looking for that? There's just a lot of factors that cause these animals to move around. They are opportunistic feeders, so they will find where their best food resources are, and they always like a quiet place to nap. So less boats, less people.
I put your interview in the chat for folks.
Oh, thank you. I
You
appreciate
bet.
that.
I'll invoice you later.
Okay.
And the SR3 phone number is in an article in the Wagner Guide. So you can look right in the your index to the Wagner Guide and look up SR3 right there.
This Wagner Guide, Mark?
That happens to be it, yes.
The one that people are waiting for?
All right, I'm going to press on. So the numbers of strandings have increased basically since the 1990s. We've seen a steady incline, as you can see from this graph, but there's a number of factors that can affect that. So anything from increasing human populations, which might put more pressure on these animals as far as how we're affecting them with toxins or boat hits or things like that. But it also means that there's more eyeballs. Where there's more humans, more people on the beach, more people are seeing these animals when they're in distress. And also, I believe that over the years that we're talking about here, there's been a growing concern for the health of marine mammals in general. So I think a lot more people are reporting what's going on with them. And I mentioned this because a lot of people ask us about, well, how many animals can the hospital serve? And it depends on the size of the animal. We built this hospital, again, to accommodate anything from a small harbor seal all the way up to a large sea lion or even a small porpoise or dolphin. So it just depends on how many size of the animals that we have in. But certainly we're not looking at serving all of the strandings because we see this graph is a little bit old, but the average is about 900 a year that show up on the beach, both alive and dead, in need of some kind of response.
Casey, how does this typically happen? You get a phone call from the Coast Guard. I suspect people don't know of your phone number yet. So, or are most of these calls coming into you directly?
Yeah, so most of the calls are coming from the stranding network. There's a large grouping of, and we're part of that network. And there's a hotline number. I'm going to give that to you guys at the end so that if you see an animal that's in distress, it's generally a member of the public that will call in and say, hey, we're concerned about this animal. And one of the numerous stranding groups will respond to see if that animal actually needs help or not. And then SR3 is called in if the animal does in fact need help. Some of these groups are all volunteers. Some of them are WDFW or Cascadia Research Collective that are well-established organizations. It just depends on what area you're in.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. One of the reasons that wildlife response and rehab is so important, again, is because these are apex predators. So if they aren't healthy, they're telling us that something is wrong in the ecosystem and the food chain of the ocean. And so this is one way for us to actually monitor the health of the ocean. You know, we might not notice if there's a huge die-off of a lot of fish that we don't know about, a population that isn't commercially important, or if the kelp beds are decreasing and we don't notice in time. So these apex predators kind of give you a little bit of insight into what's going on out there without us monitoring every single thing. Of course, there's human interactions. Sometimes people are picking up harbor seal pups because they were concerned and didn't realize that their actions weren't the best way to go. Other times it is direct interactions like this monk seal here with a fishing spear through its head, gunshot wounds, things like that. And of course, then there's disaster response just by way of how we live on this planet. Things like oil spills happen. So we need to make sure that we're prepared to help these animals in those kinds of events.
Casey, there's a question in the chat, and I'd like to build on that. How can you tap into the eyes and ears out on the water when you think about the crowds and the wisdom of the crowds and all the boaters out there as citizen scientists? And the question from Denny is, does SR3 want to know about the deceased animals on beach, seals, sea lions, etc.? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you're finding an animal dead or alive, the Stranding Network definitely wants to know about it. So whether, again, I'm going to give you guys that phone number at the end. It is an 800 number, which I think is helpful because you guys are boaters, you move around. So no matter where you are, they will connect you to the appropriate group versus calling SR3 and then me having to transfer you to another group. It's kind of nice to just have that one number and they'll make sure you get to the right place. So yes, dead or alive, we always want to know about it. Dead animals, while they might be gross, they really have a lot to teach us about what's happening in the ocean. You know, if they're in good enough condition, we will often come out and do a full necropsy or an autopsy to discover what happened. And yes, I think mariners are extremely important to everything that we do. They tell us things that I'm not on the water all the time. So you guys have a really unique perspective and advantage that we love to tap into. So please always feel free to reach out to us with questions. Even if you see something odd and you're just curious, we're always happy to help. Gunshot cases, I mentioned, you know, we do necropsies. So this is something that we will respond to dead animals, and we may actually come out and take x-rays on the beach to determine the cause of death. And we do see quite a few gunshot cases here in Washington. So this is something that SR3 does respond to. It does play a big role in enforcement and also in education to helping people understand that this isn't a whole ecosystem, and gunshot is not going to help with the problems that we're facing, such as fishing declines and things like that. So it's a big important piece of what we do. The other thing that we participate in, obviously, is research. One that recently came out that I found very interesting was an antibiotic resistance study for harbor seals. And this is important because harbor seals are not taking antibiotics. So where are they getting them from? This is coming from people often dumping medications down the drain, not realizing that that does make its way out to the ocean. It's coming from runoff from farms when we prophylactically treat our livestock and things like that. And of course, things like fish farms. The reason this is important is because once animals are antibiotic resistant, it makes it very difficult for us to help them if they need antibiotics. This can become a huge problem when you start talking about animals that are endangered. So particularly for like our southern residents, if one of them needed help, and they were antibiotic resistant, that would be very difficult to help them. So that's kind of how that relates. And of course, it all relates back to human health as well. If these guys are antibiotic resistant and they're eating the same kinds of fish we are, do we have cause for concern? Wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about our whale entanglement response program, because I think this really is where mariners can be extremely helpful, and boaters in general. And this is kind of another one of those ways we're addressing the threats that are out there for marine animals. Entanglement has become the leading cause of death for whales and dolphins worldwide, and over 300,000 marine animals die from it per year. And a lot of people have the misconception that this is due to the derelict gear, when in reality, almost 98% of it is active fishing gear. And it's not because it's set illegally. It's not because fishermen are out to get to catch a whale. It's simply a matter of how much gear is in the water and where it's put and where the whales are. So it's not a malicious thing necessarily. It's just something we need to look at and keep researching and figure out how can we keep these things apart. We don't believe that it is you either have fishing or you have healthy whale populations. We firmly believe we want both, but we do know it's a major problem. SCAR studies have shown that 70% of whales are entangled at some point in their life. Not all of them die, of course. We're not losing 70% of whales to this. So some of them do disentangle themselves. That's why they have the scars. Some of them are disentangled by different entanglement response groups throughout the country. But we know this is a problem. So we spend a lot of time working with fishermen to try and determine, are there gear modifications that can be made? Do we wait to open fisheries in certain areas until the whales have gone through? What changes can we make to avoid this? Because fishermen don't want to entangle whales either. They don't want to lose their gear, and they're not looking to hurt these animals. So it's a big problem that we're working on together.
So you're having conversations with commercial fishing industries and their trade associations?
Yeah, so Doug Sandilands, our whale entanglement specialist, spends a fair amount of time communicating with the industry and also going to the working groups, and also spends a lot of time communicating with boaters. This is where you guys play a huge role in helping these animals. Again, we're not out on the water all the time, you are, and knowing how to spot an entangled whale is really important. And then of course, reporting it and staying with the animal if you can, because if you report it once you get back to the dock and it's an hour later, whales can travel very far in an hour and we don't know in what direction. So finding a whale is really difficult. Well, we can find a whale, but finding that whale is really difficult.
How would you describe the relationship between the commercial fishing industry and SR3? Productive, collaborative, confrontational?
I would definitely say that it's productive. There's often times of contention, of course. There's some very technologically savvy options out there, such as ropeless fishing, which is amazing, but it's not really financially feasible for a lot of the industry right now. They're working on that. And change is hard for any big industry like that. There's always going to be some pushback, but I think the fishermen are open to trying to find some solutions because they realize, particularly in areas like California, if they have one whale reported as entangled, the whole fishing gets shut down. So that's not what anyone's looking for either. So I do think there's some incentive to try and all work together on this solution. I mentioned it's difficult to spot an entangled whale sometimes because often this is what you see above the water, the dorsal fin, and then this is what's going on underneath the water. So sometimes you might see the buoys behind the animal and you can tell that, oh, okay, it's pulling some equipment. So you know there's a problem there. But a lot of times you don't see that. So it's not always as easy as people might think it is. So we do think a lot of whales that are entangled actually get missed and not reported. I show you this image to caution you if you see a whale that's entangled as a boater to please stay far away because they can often be trailing tons of gear. So if you get too close, your boat can wind up entangled in all this gear that they're trailing as well, which would be a problem for you, but also more stress for the animal as well. And just to keep in mind that these animals are stressed. They might not look like it to you, but it's an animal that's dealing with a health problem and has a lot of gear it's pulling. So it is a stressed out animal and they can be unpredictable. So just be very careful. It is dangerous work. We don't ever want a boater or anyone else attempting to disentangle a whale. What we want you guys doing is to make sure that you immediately report it and call the trained team. It takes a team of about at least 5 people to do this kind of work. So it is pretty intense. So the best way that you can help is to keep your eyes out for entangled whales. If you see something odd, then please do report it. These days, I feel like everyone has a camera at the ready with their phones. Videos are extremely helpful. As I mentioned, if you're able to stay with the animal, that's really, really helpful because it's hard to relocate that exact same whale. And then, like I said, just make sure you report the entanglements immediately. So this is a number for the whale hotline. And I'll make sure you guys have this so you can send it out in your notes if you like to later. And if you can't remember this number,
We've got
and
notes
you want-
later, Mark. Wait a second.
Yeah, Peter.
Casey, you're asking a
Now
lot
you
here.
do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Notes. That's it. We do notes. Yeah. Definitely will be in the notes.
because this is a different phone number from the one I'm going to give you later. But regardless, even if you get these numbers mixed up, it's okay. Call some numbers so that they can make sure to send somebody out. The other type of entanglement that we deal with is usually with seals or sea lions. Now, this is not typically the same type of fishing gear. This usually is more that derelict or ocean debris that we see, and it often are the packing strips that come around things like bait boxes and other types of shipping boxes. They get around their neck, and the animal actually grows into it. So, and then this one is a little fishing gear, which we often see. But with both of these things, whales and sea lions, this is not something that is an immediate cause to death right away. So these are things that are kind of long-term problems. The animals suffer for quite a while before they might actually have a physical illness from it or die. So, you know, responding to each individual animal is not the long-term goal. The goal is to actually work with these industries to figure out how do we get these items out of the water to keep them away from the animals, particularly things like plastic straps. You know, these degrade into microplastics. So it's a problem for the whole food chain, not just for these animals when it's around their neck. Last program I wanted to talk to you guys about is our whale and dolphin health research. This is Dr. Holly Fernbach, and all of this research is done using drones, some small, some large. But what this does is allow us to make sure that we're doing minimally invasive research. The animals don't even know that we're there. The drones are at least 200 feet over them, and the boat is very far away. So it's kind of a nice way to get a peek into their lives when they don't know we're there, which means that you get a little different look at their behavior. We can also take these incredible images that allow us to basically assess their body condition. We can see who's gaining weight, who's losing weight, who's pregnant. We can actually even measure the growth rate of calves to make sure, much like when you take your child to the doctor, are they developing at the right rate? How are they growing? Like a little doctor checkup, only they never even knew we were there, and nobody had to get on a scale, which in my opinion is the best. And we mainly do this with Southern residents. And I'm really excited to share with you guys that this year we're actually going to be able to increase the different metrics that we're looking at, which I think is cool. So historically, we've taken these photos that allow us to measure the body, tons of measurements all the way down the body and get an idea for what's going on there. But now we're going to start looking at things like skin condition and behavior, such as, you know, assessing if a whale is trailing behind everyone, is something potentially wrong with their health, or if they're spending more time with one part of the pod and not the other, kind of just assessing what's going on with that behavior, and potentially even doing things like taking a whale's temperature from the drone. Don't worry, we're not getting in the water to take a whale's temperature. We'll be using the advanced technology to do these sorts of things that is going to give us a better, well-rounded health profile of what's going on with these animals. And then you have other groups that are doing things like collecting fecal samples and collecting blow samples that we can then add to this health profile that really is going to give you the full picture of how are they doing. And we also do this with other species, not just killer whales, but also humpback whales. That's this picture here. Gray whales, they are already moving into our area, so that's kind of exciting. I'll mention a little bit more about them in a second. We do this with harbor seals and things like bottlenose dolphins, and this is a picture of killer whales in Antarctica. So really animals all over the world that we're looking at to see how their health is in various parts of the oceans, which is really pretty exciting.
Casey, we've got a question that came in from Diane Lander about, she seemed to think that the population of dolphins in Puget Sound has been going down. Is that correct?
Which is she talking about, harbor porpoise, or is she talking about striped dolphins? What's she referring to?
I'm sorry, she didn't specify.
I know we've been talking about harbor porpoise for a while, but there's some debate upon whether the population is actually decreasing or if they're moving into different areas.
She's
So-
talking
Yeah,
about harbor purposes.
Yeah.
Harbor porpoise, yeah. That is not we look at them occasionally. They're much harder for us to do the drone research with, but it's not something that we specialize in. I have heard varying theories on whether, again, the numbers are actually going down or if they have kind of started moving to different spots. So that's a debate among the harbor porpoise researchers that I won't get too far into, but they're really hard to study. They're very shy. They're just now starting to do photo ID with them to try and develop a catalog, which helps with understanding their populations, of course. But I don't know of anyone that's doing population counts.
Maybe my etiquette class will help them with their shyness.
There you go.
Yeah. Diane's wondering, what about kind of the interface between the military testing and the dolphins? Have you done any research on that?
We don't. I know that there's a lot of, well, I shouldn't say that. We did participate in some of that research down in California. Dr. Holly Fernbach did, but we have not done anything here locally with that. And they were looking at using the drones. They were looking at how were the animals reacting to pre-recorded things that they were playing. And it seemed to vary, honestly. I can send you guys some links to papers, but sometimes there was a heavy response and sometimes there wasn't. So there wasn't anything, every single time they did the same thing. It was pretty variable. A couple other things I wanted to mention that you guys might see out there, which you might already be aware of, but I always like to bring it up. We get a lot of calls about what I call sailing sea lions. They will even sometimes trick people into thinking they're orcas in distress. They are simply thermoregulating. So this is how they control their body temperature. We see this a lot in the spring, and they are often trying to warm up where they're sticking this flipper out of the water. It might be a front one or a back one. They're very vascular, and so it's a way for them to kind of soak up some heat. A lot of times people will see that. Here's a good example. This picture was sent to us as a pod of killer whales in distress when it was some relaxing sea lions. Sometimes people even report that the sea lion is in distress. They know it's a sea lion, but it seems to be having some sort of problem. Just a completely normal behavior for them.
Casey, can you talk about this? You haven't really hit this yet, but I was wondering, can you talk about the dogs that can study whale poop?
Oh yeah, the scat dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not our program.
Let's just get that out there. Yes.
Yeah, no worries. Not our program, but a good friend of ours, Deborah Giles, does that with her dog Eba, the whale poop sniffing dog. And it's a University of Washington Conservation Canines program, and it's incredible. They've been doing it for quite some time now. And basically the dog is trained to help detect the scent of whale poop. The boat will just keep driving, and the dog uses the scent in the air to help direct the boat so that they can go and collect a fecal sample. And you do this, you can stay far away from the whales, you can trail behind them, and you can go in and scoop up that sample.
And that tells them the health of the whale or what the kind of diet of the whale?
Yeah, it gets a little more in there as far as seeing what the diet, what they're eating at certain times a year, which is really interesting and helpful for conservation. It can do some detection of different hormones. I know they were trying out some different things to see if they could pull even more information like cortisol levels for stress levels and things like that. I'm not sure how far they've come with that and how accurate it is, but yeah, they're looking to gain as much information as they can from those poop samples. You can see parasites often, things like that.
Thank you.
Of course. Harbor seal pupping season is coming, and I wanted to give you guys an idea of when you might start to see pups out there. So this map here tells you, that's going to start on the outer coast around May, and we start seeing pups later and later through the summer, kind of in the Puget Sound region. And I know a lot of people call us and report pups, and boaters can get concerned sometimes, but I also like to warn you just so that as boaters, you don't get too close to an area where a lot of harbor seals are hauled out. Because harbor seals are very skittish, so if you scare a bunch of them off into the water when they've just had pups, you can potentially separate mom and pup, and they may or may not be able to reunite. So just something to be aware of as you kind of are out there observing them, to try and keep your distance, particularly in this time of pupping. So give
Do
them
they
your best
bite?
shot.
I've run into
Yeah.
them on the docks and, sunbathing on the docks, and where you almost have to step over them, which is a bit of a concern.
Yes, they can produce a nasty bite for sure. If they feel threatened, that's, I think a lot of the ones that you're seeing on the docks might have become a bit more used to people because they kind of go to the same dock and they're like, oh yeah, I know these people and what they do. So I would always, tell people to be very cautious. They might kind of behave like dogs sometimes and look a little bit like our dogs, but don't ever assume that they won't bite, because they definitely will. But not all babies need help. They only spend 4 short weeks with their mom, so it's really important that they get as much of that time with her as possible. Mom is always the best teacher, even though we do rehabilitate these animals. I'm nowhere near as good of a harbor seal mom as an actual harbor seal is. As much as I would like to take good care of them, she's better. So we want to make sure these pups stay with their moms, and the best way to do that is to give them as much space as possible. Sometimes babies will be on the beach or on a dock or something like that, hanging out for a little while by themselves while mom goes off fishing, or it might just be nearby in the area. So don't always assume that a baby by itself means that it needs help. But if you are concerned or just want to report it, if it's an area of heavy human traffic, like a dock or something, please do call. The hotline number is listed down there at the bottom, and that is for any stranded, sick, or injured marine animal. It's a different phone number than the whale entanglements, but regardless, these folks can help you if you're dealing with that issue as well. And of course, as always, please take photos or video from a distance though, so you don't disturb them. Moms often will not come back for a baby if they feel threatened. And if no one's around, if she doesn't come back for that baby, they won't be reunited, and it's not a very good future for that little one. So that's really important during those summer months.
Casey, we broke a record tonight. This is rather exciting. The most questions ever in the chat box.
I love it.
That tells you something. So from Martin, has there ever been a significant increase in harbor seals? Or I'm sorry, has there been a significant increase in harbor seals? I was in Oak Harbor and I stopped counting at 36 harbor seals. And for you, Mark, I can't count much higher than that, so I'd be in trouble. Everett has a bunch. They just seem to be everywhere in large numbers.
Yes.
Yeah, so the populations have gone back to kind of what they were pre-hunting. So I think a lot of what people, depending on your age, perhaps, seem to think there's been like this sharp population spike, when in reality, the numbers leveled out in the early 2000s and they've stayed that way. You also have to remember harbor seals will move around to different areas. So, they might be in this area one summer and then they've moved to a separate area. They stay within about a 30-mile home range, but we're not seeing any kind of huge spike in the population. Actually, we've seen a slight downturn, which isn't concerning or anything because we do have a healthy population, because we've had an increase in transient killer whales, and they are the best population control for harbor seals that we could ever ask for. They eat over 1,000 of them a year in the Penapeg group. So they're helping keep those populations under control. I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that back in the 60s, they were almost hunted to extinction. So people are used to what those numbers used to be. And also we have to remember a lot has changed since that time frame, meaning the habitat is worse. Our fishing numbers are down. Fishing has increased. So there's just a lot of things that have changed along with that, causing a lot of problems to build up.
And Casey, can you touch on the Be Whale Wise guidelines?
Yeah, so I was going to mention this. Always encouraging people to be whale wise. Gray whales have actually already returned to our area. So yes, be whale wise as far as your distances, but also just be alert. We have had whales hit by boats, particularly gray whales. They have this really low profile, as you guys probably know. They like to feed in shallow areas. So just be cautious with your speeds, particularly around that Everett-Saratoga Passage area this time of year. Those whales just don't tend to move very fast. And like I said, they can be really hard to see sometimes. So keep a close eye out. And I know the guidelines have changed several times. And I'm sorry, this picture is fuzzy, but always just make sure if you are around killer whales that you're keeping your distance, you're not cutting them off at the pass, and you're just really being cautious around these animals, particularly southern residents. A lot of that's going to be changing for the whale watching industry this year. And I know there's going to be probably some contentious times out on the water. So just be very cautious around other boaters as well.
Very good.
One last thing I wanted to mention to you guys is I was really interested when you started talking about the heritage, the National Heritage Spot. So we recently partnered with Mission Blue, and the Salish Sea was declared a Hope Spot by that, that organization. And basically what this means is that SR3 was designated the Hope Spot champion. We nominated the area. And so what we're hoping to do is bring a lot of these different nonprofit organizations that are working so hard on various things, from habitat restoration to different advocacy things that are going on, research, kind of trying to bring us together under an umbrella of hope per se, so that we can all try and focus on this together and move forward together. There's a lot of people working on separate projects that may not know who is doing what. So we're hoping to kind of to mesh that a bit better. Also to increase the research that's going on in the area, and as well as hopefully drive some additional protections for the Salish Sea. So we're really excited to see where that goes, but I just wanted to mention that this evening.
Awesome.
And then that's my last slide. How did I do on time?
Oh, you're right
You're doing
on.
it
Good.
right
Yeah.
on.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
And
Great.
as Peter said, I know you have your slide up for questions, but we've gotten more questions than we've gotten for any others. So that's a great sign. A lot of people are engaged.
I love it. Well, I'm always happy to answer questions. You guys have had some great questions. You know, our marine environment is just part of who we are here in the Pacific Northwest. And SR3, we really truly appreciate boaters. We love working with boaters, and I hope you guys will follow us on social media and take our information, and please reach out at any point.
Great. Well, Casey, this has been fantastic. And I think you've engaged now with plenty more observers on the water who are going to be really watching for animals in distress and giving you a call. And
Well, we appreciate that.
Hopefully you'll roll up with that ambulance, and I want to go for a ride.
Well, I might need you to take me out on the boat to go help that animal.
I've never,
Okay, we can do that.
I've
Yeah,
never heard
that's
the
a
words
deal.
hope you roll up in an ambulance before, Mark. Normally that's not a good thing, but I'll take your word for it if that's how you roll.
That's right. That's
Landon,
right.
how did you find SR3?
Great, we love it. It's
Yeah.
so
How did-
exciting.
Yeah, how did you first discover them?
Well, through our scouting around by boat and doing work for Des Moines on our marine consulting studies and learning about SR3 coming here. And that was just very exciting to have them here and be doing the work they're doing and have it in this area, which, as Casey said, was very lacking in previous years.
Yeah, great.
It was really through our connection through Des Moines. So we were doing some work with Des Moines Marina, and we were kind of surprised when they announced that. So it was a very welcome thing. It's also something, by the way, Casey, you know, if you can, I think in a telephone call we were talking about you might have some plans for accommodating visitors sometime in the future, and something about you might be looking for funding for that to create some sort of a visitor, not center, but a kiosk, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we can't necessarily have the doors open like an aquarium to allow people to come through, but what we're looking to design is, yeah, I guess I would call it like a little kiosk that's basically right outside of our facility that would have live camera feeds, so you could see what's going on behind the scenes for times when we might not be able to give behind the scenes tours, just depending on how things are going with the animals. We'll also do plenty of Facebook Lives, and we really, as I mentioned, it's all very community supported. This is an opportunity for the community to actually be involved in hands-on conservation. So anything we can do to incorporate people understanding what's going on here and being involved, we're definitely working towards that.
And Casey, a question came in. Should they use your website to contact SR3 for people who want to volunteer?
Yeah, so if you want to volunteer, you can go on our website under Get Involved, and there's a short volunteer form you can fill out. And then just make sure you receive the welcome email. Sometimes it winds up into your junk mail or trash, so double check that. And then, yeah, you'll be notified as volunteer opportunities come up. Been a little different with COVID, of course, as most people understand, but we're hoping this spring and this summer we will start up volunteer orientations again and be able to get people involved with our daily animal care here on site.
Well, Casey, I
I
want to
have
thank you. Go ahead.
one last question for you about,
Yeah.
have you seen or noticed any sea or marine life effects, positive or negative, as a result of the sociological changes in humans during the pandemic? In other words, are people out on the water more? Are they not on the beaches? Is that affecting one way? Have you seen any results like that?
Yeah, so, when it all first started, we noticed a decrease in calls from places like national parks and out along the coast, the Olympic National Park, things like that, because nobody could get in there and we couldn't get in there to help with any rescues either. So that was, we worry that maybe we missed a bit of data, both from live animals and dead animals. But then we had an increase in calls for more on our local beaches. So sometimes animals that didn't need help, but there were just so many people out, they saw them. There was like a series of sailing sea lion calls where I think every person in West Seattle may have called about those sea lions that were relaxing. So yes, we've definitely seen a lot more people out on the water and on our beaches for sure.
Thanks.
Oh, good. Well, Casey, thank you for your time. I also want to thank our sponsor, right, Mark?
Yes, the Grospec Group is once again, and they have homes on the water where you could have seals and otters in your very own backyard.
Love it. I was going to try to show their screen, but I'll have to do that
No,
next
that's
week.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I can stop sharing.
Oh, that's okay.
No,
So
no. That's
what's on tap for next week?
next week. We have. I should have it confirmed for tomorrow, but I'll go out on a limb here. Larry Graff, the president of Aspen Power Catamarans, and another one of our adventure shows where Larry decided he was going to take one of their boats, trailered it 1,700 miles into the interior of Canada, put it in the water, and then went down the Mackenzie River to the Arctic Circle, and then turned around and came back. And he's got quite an interesting description of that trip and all the wildlife they saw along the way, and
Yeah, wow.
quite an adventure.
That's when you are just dying for people to ask you about how your weekend was.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like, oh,
I
please.
I don't ask Larry anymore because
Yeah, I understand. I know
he was
Larry.
hanging on the side of a mountain or on a snowmobile usually.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Is this
It's all look bad.
Mark, is this a chapter that we're going to be adding to the Wagoner?
maybe the Mackenzie River and
That's
up
right.
to the Arctic.
Very
Yes.
niche group.
Yes.
Well, thanks everyone for at home. This is week 37. That was Fran Tarkenton was the host of Saturday Night Live.
Wow.
37th episode. That, Fran Tarkenton, of course, from That's Incredible fame.
Yes.
That's where he made his
If
name.
you say so.
Yeah. But yeah, so thanks, Casey. Great to meet you
Thanks,
tonight.
Casey.
And thanks everyone at home. And Landon's, I'll see you next Thursday. Same with you, Mark. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
Have a good
everybody. I
night.
really appreciate it.
Good night.
Bye.